La mujer Apache compró al ganadero cautivo, esa noche le susurró. Serás mi esposo. The sun rose slowly over the wide, dry land, painting the sky with soft orange and pale gold. The morning looked peaceful, but the land itself was harsh and unforgiving. This was a place where survival depended on strength, patience, and routine. The cattle rancher had lived here for many years. His life followed the same pattern every day. He woke before sunrise, checked his animals, repaired fences, and watched the land with careful eyes. He was not a rich man, but he was proud of what he had built with his own hands. He believed in hard work and silence. Words were not as important to him as actions. The land taught him that. Droughts, storms, and long lonely nights had shaped his character. He had learned to depend on himself and not expect help from anyone. Even though the land was quiet, danger was never far away. He knew that, but he did not live in fear. Fear made a man weak, and weakness had no place in this land. That morning felt no different from the others. The air was cool and the cattle moved slowly, chewing and breathing in a steady rhythm. The rancher adjusted his saddle and began his usual work. He did not notice the silence changing. Birds stopped singing. The wind seemed to hold its breath. These were signs he had learned to recognize, but by the time he sensed something was wrong, it was already too late. The attack came fast and without warning. Shapes appeared from the hills, moving like shadows. The rancher barely had time to react. He reached for his tools, but the number of attackers was too great. He was surrounded, overpowered, and pulled from his horse. The ground felt hard beneath him as he fell. Dust filled his mouth, and the sky spun above his head. His heart pounded, not only from fear but from shock. His quiet world had broken in a single moment. Hands tied him tightly. Voices he did not understand filled the air. He struggled, but his strength was useless against so many. The cattle scattered in fear, their loud cries echoing across the land. That sound stayed with him as he was forced to his feet and pushed forward. Each step away from his ranch felt like a step away from his life, his past, and everything he knew. As they traveled, the sun climbed higher, burning his skin and draining his strength. His mouth grew dry, but no water was given to him at first. His thoughts became heavy and confused. Questions filled his mind. Would he ever return? Would anyone come looking for him? Or would he disappear like so many others before him? He had heard stories, but he never believed they would become his own reality. The land changed as they moved deeper into unfamiliar territory. The open plains slowly turned into rough ground filled with rocks and narrow paths. The rancher stumbled often, and each time he was pulled back up without words. There was no cruelty in the actions, but there was no kindness either. It was clear that his comfort did not matter. Only his movement did. Among the group, there was one woman who stood apart. She did not shout or rush like the others. Her eyes followed him carefully, studying him as if she were trying to understand something hidden beneath his worn clothes and tired face. She carried herself with quiet confidence. Her posture showed strength, but there was also something else, something heavy like sadness carried for a long time. The rancher noticed her attention, though he did not know why. In moments of danger, the mind searches for meaning in small things. He wondered if she was important or if she was simply curious. When their eyes met briefly, she did not look away. That moment unsettled him more than the rough journey itself. As night fell, they stopped to rest. A small fire was lit, and the smell of smoke mixed with the cold desert air. The rancher was pushed to the side, still tied and left alone. His body ached, and his mind replayed the events of the day again and again. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound made him tense, every shadow looked like a threat. From where he sat, he could see the woman again. She sat near the fire, her face lit by flickering flames. The light revealed lines of experience on her face, not age but life. She looked like someone who had endured loss and learned to survive without asking for mercy. At times, her gaze drifted toward him, thoughtful and unreadable. He tried to understand her world, even though he was trapped in it. He realized that nothing in this place happened without reason. Every action had meaning, every decision was shaped by tradition and survival. That thought did not comfort him, but it gave him a strange sense of clarity. This was not chaos. This was order, just not his own. The next days followed a similar pattern. Long walks under the sun, short rests, little conversation. His strength slowly faded, but his will remained. He forced himself to stay alert, to observe, to remember details. He did not know why, but something inside him refused to give up. Perhaps it was hope, or perhaps it was stubbornness born from years of fighting the land itself. The woman continued to watch him. Sometimes she spoke to others, gesturing in his direction. He could not understand the words, but he sensed that his fate was being discussed. This knowledge filled him with anxiety. His future was no longer his own. It rested in the hands of people who lived by rules he did not know. One evening, as they reached a larger camp, the atmosphere shifted. There were more people, more fires, and a sense of structure. This was not a temporary stop. This was a place where decisions were made. The rancher felt a deep chill, even though the fire was close. He knew this moment mattered. He was brought forward and made to stand. People looked at him with curiosity, some with indifference. He felt exposed, like an object rather than a person. The woman stepped forward as well. Her presence seemed to change the mood. Others listened when she spoke. Her voice was calm but firm, and her words carried weight. The rancher did not understand the language, but he understood the feeling. Something important was happening. He watched her face, searching for signs: anger, cruelty, satisfaction. Instead, he saw determination mixed with something softer, almost hesitant. It confused him. When the discussion ended, the woman looked directly at him. There was no smile, no threat in her eyes, only certainty. In that moment, he realized that his life had taken a turn he could never have imagined. He was no longer just a captive passing through. He had become part of a decision, a future he could not yet see. As night fell again, he sat alone, staring into the fire. His past life felt distant, like a story belonging to someone else. The ranch, the cattle, the quiet mornings, all of it seemed unreal now. Ahead of him was only uncertainty. But deep inside, beneath fear and exhaustion, a new awareness began to grow. This was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of something far more complicated. And somewhere nearby, the Apache woman watched the flames as well, her thoughts just as heavy, her path already chosen. Morning arrived quietly, without comfort. The rancher woke with stiff muscles and a dry throat. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he felt the tight pull around his wrists and the hard ground beneath him, and reality returned all at once. The camp was already awake. People moved with purpose, gathering belongings, speaking in low voices, preparing for the day ahead. No one looked at him with anger or pity. To them, he was simply there. He was given a small amount of food and water. It was not much, but it was enough to keep him standing. He noticed that this time the water was handed to him directly instead of being placed on the ground. That small change stayed in his mind. In a place where nothing felt accidental, even small actions carried meaning. As the camp began to move, he was guided forward again. His steps were slow, but steadier than before. His body had begun to accept the new routine, even if his mind still resisted it. He continued to observe everything: the way people walked, the way they listened to one another, the unspoken rules that seemed to guide every movement. The woman remained close. She did not walk beside him, but she was never far. When others spoke about him, she listened carefully. When someone looked at him too harshly, she intervened with a short word or a simple gesture. The rancher did not understand the language, but he understood the shift in energy. Whatever was happening, she was involved in it deeply. By midday, they reached a larger gathering place. This was different from the camps before. There were more shelters, more people, and a stronger sense of permanence. Children ran between the structures, elders sat in shaded areas, and the air felt heavier with importance. The rancher felt a deep sense of unease. Places like this were not meant for passing through. They were places where lives changed. He was brought to the center and made to wait. Time stretched painfully. People came and went, casting glances his way. Some showed curiosity, others showed disapproval. He lowered his eyes not out of weakness but out of instinct. Drawing attention felt dangerous. Finally, the woman stepped forward. She carried something in her hands, items carefully chosen and clearly valuable. She placed them down with deliberate care. The rancher watched, confused. He had seen exchanges before on the frontier, but never like this. This was not a simple trade. This felt personal. Voices rose around them, not in anger but in debate. The woman spoke calmly with confidence. She did not rush her words. She stood firm as if she had already accepted the outcome. The rancher searched her face again. He expected to see coldness or ownership or triumph. Instead, he saw resolve mixed with tension, like someone taking a difficult but necessary step. After a long moment, the discussion ended. The items were accepted. The people around them nodded, some reluctantly, others with understanding. The decision was made. The rancher felt it before he understood it. The way people looked at him changed. He was no longer simply a captive of the group. His place had shifted. He did not know what that meant, and that uncertainty weighed heavily on his chest. The woman approached him slowly. She did not touch him, but she stood close enough that he could sense her presence clearly. She spoke to him in a low voice. He could not understand the words, but the tone was steady, not threatening. There was no joy in her expression, only seriousness. Soon after, his bindings were loosened slightly, not removed but adjusted. Again, it was a small change, but it mattered. His wrists burned less and blood flowed more freely. He flexed his fingers carefully, afraid to draw attention, but grateful all the same. He was led away from the center of the camp to a quieter area. The shelter he was placed near was simple but clean. He was given a place to sit and rest. For the first time since his capture, he was not surrounded by constant movement and noise. The silence pressed in, giving his thoughts room to grow. What had just happened? Why had she chosen him? These questions circled endlessly in his mind. He had nothing special to offer. He was not powerful, not wealthy, not important. He was just a man who worked the land. The idea that his life could be claimed by someone else so suddenly felt unreal. As the hours passed, the woman returned occasionally. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she simply stood nearby, watching the horizon. She never stayed long, and she never explained anything. Her presence was calm, but it carried weight. The rancher sensed that she was not watching him like a possession, but like a responsibility. At one point, he gathered the courage to speak. His voice was rough from lack of use. He said a few simple words, hoping for understanding. She listened without interruption. When he finished, she shook her head gently, not in refusal, but in acknowledgement of the distance between their worlds. She answered in her own language slowly, as if trying to make him understand through tone alone. That night, the camp was quieter than before. There was no celebration, no tension in the air. Life continued as it always had, steady and controlled. The rancher lay awake, staring at the dark sky above him. Stars stretched endlessly, the same stars he used to watch from his ranch. That thought brought a sharp ache to his chest. He wondered if anyone would come looking for him. He wondered if his ranch would survive without him. He wondered if the land would remember him at all. These thoughts threatened to break his spirit, but he pushed them aside. Survival required focus, not regret. The woman sat near a small fire not far from him. The light softened her features, making her look almost gentle. He realized then that she was not acting on impulse. This choice had meaning beyond him. It was tied to her past, her losses, and her hopes for the future. Though fear still lived inside him, something else began to form beside it, curiosity. He wanted to understand her reasons, her world, and the path she had chosen. He did not accept his situation, but he could no longer deny it either. As the night deepened, he felt the weight of the decision settle over him. His life had been exchanged, not as a punishment, but as part of a plan he did not yet understand. He closed his eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring new answers or perhaps new questions. Nearby, the woman stared into the fire, her expression unreadable. She had made her choice, and now she carried its burden. Two lives, shaped by different worlds, were now tied together by fate, moving forward into an uncertain future neither of them could escape. Days passed, and the rancher slowly realized that his life had entered a different rhythm. Time no longer moved according to sunrise and sunset on his own land. Instead, it followed the quiet structure of the camp. People woke early, worked together, shared food, and rested when the light faded. Everything had purpose. Nothing was rushed, yet nothing was wasted. He was no longer tied. That change had happened without announcement. One morning he woke and found his hands free. No one explained it. No one watched him closely either. At first he thought it might be a mistake. He stayed still, afraid that any sudden movement would bring punishment, but nothing happened. Life around him continued as usual. The woman had made that decision. He understood that much, even if no words were spoken. With freedom of movement came a new kind of weight. He could walk, but where would he go? The land around the camp was unfamiliar, harsh, and vast. Running would mean certain failure. More than that, something inside him held him back. He wanted answers more than escape. He was given small tasks. At first they were simple, carrying water, gathering wood, helping with animals. No one treated him like a servant, but no one treated him like a guest either. He existed in a space between. Some people ignored him. Others watched him carefully, waiting to see what kind of man he was. The work helped him. Moving his body kept his thoughts from sinking too deep into fear. His hands remembered labor. Whether fixing fences or lifting heavy loads, the work felt familiar even if the place did not. Slowly, people began to trust him with more responsibility. A nod here, a brief word there. Trust grew quietly like grass pushing through dry soil. The woman observed all of this from a distance. She did not praise him, but she noticed. When others questioned his presence, she spoke calmly. When he struggled with a task, she did not step in, but she made sure someone else did. Her protection was subtle but steady. At night, he sat alone and thought about his old life. He remembered the smell of dust after rain, the sound of cattle moving at dawn, the comfort of routine. Those memories brought pain but also strength. They reminded him who he was. He refused to let that man disappear. Language remained a barrier. He picked up small words, gestures, meanings from context. People laughed when he mispronounced things, but it was not cruel laughter. It was the laughter of life continuing. He learned when to speak and when silence was better. Silence, he discovered, carried respect here. Children were the first to accept him fully. They watched him with open curiosity, asked questions he could not understand, and followed him when he worked. Their ease around him softened something in his chest. He smiled for the first time since his capture, and that smile surprised him. The woman noticed that too. One evening, she sat beside him as he repaired a tool. She did not speak at first. The fire crackled softly nearby. The sky above them was wide and full of stars. After a long moment, she pointed to the tool, then to him, and spoke a word slowly. He repeated it, unsure. She nodded once. That small exchange felt like a bridge being built. They began to share moments like that. No long conversations, no deep explanations. Just shared space, shared silence, shared understanding. He learned her name through repetition. It sounded strong and gentle at the same time. Saying it felt strange in his mouth, but meaningful. He started to see her not as someone who had taken his freedom, but as someone carrying her own heavy past. He noticed how others looked to her for guidance, how elders respected her, how her eyes sometimes filled with distance when she thought no one was watching. Loss lived inside her just as fear lived inside him. One afternoon, a storm rolled in suddenly. Wind tore through the camp and rain fell hard and fast. People moved quickly to secure shelters and animals. Without thinking, the rancher ran to help. His instincts took over. He moved with purpose, tying ropes, calming animals, lifting fallen supports. When the storm passed, the camp stood strong. People looked at him differently then, not as a stranger, not as a captive, but as someone who belonged, even if only a little. The woman approached him afterward. She placed a hand briefly on his arm, a gesture simple and respectful. She spoke a few words softly. He did not understand them fully, but he understood the meaning. Gratitude, acknowledgement, acceptance. That night he slept deeply for the first time. Still, questions remained. His heart was divided. One part wanted to return to his old life no matter the cost. The other part recognized that this place, this woman, and these people had given him something unexpected, a chance to be seen again, not just as a rancher but as a man. He wondered what she truly wanted from him. Her actions showed intention, but her silence kept her thoughts hidden. He feared what the future might demand of him, yet he also feared what leaving would mean now. As weeks passed, the line between survival and belonging grew thinner. He laughed sometimes. He shared food. He listened. He learned. And in quiet moments when the woman sat near him and watched the fire, he felt something unfamiliar but real, a fragile connection forming, built not on force but on shared endurance. Neither of them spoke of the future yet, but both felt it moving closer, like footsteps in the dark, steady, unavoidable, and full of change. Time continued to move forward, quiet and steady, and the rancher found himself changing in ways he did not expect. The days no longer felt heavy with fear. Instead, they carried a calm tiredness, the kind that comes from honest work and shared effort. He still remembered who he was, but he was also becoming someone new, shaped by this place and the people in it. The woman became more present in his daily life, not in a commanding way, but in small moments that mattered. She asked him to walk with her when she checked on the animals. She showed him how the people here gathered food from the land, how they respected what was taken and never wasted it. She spoke slowly, using gestures, repeating words until he understood. Each lesson was patient, never forced. He learned that she had lost much in her life. Though she did not tell him directly, the signs were clear. The way she paused when she saw children playing. The way her eyes softened when elders spoke. The way silence sometimes wrapped around her like a shield. She was strong because she had to be. Survival had taught her that softness alone was not enough. One evening they walked together beyond the edge of the camp. The land stretched wide before them, quiet and endless. She pointed to the horizon and spoke of seasons, of movement, of how nothing stayed the same for long. He listened carefully. Though he did not understand every word, he understood the meaning. Life here was built on acceptance of change. He wanted to tell her about his own land, about the ranch, the animals, the way the soil felt between his fingers. He tried, using simple words and motions. She listened closely, nodding, asking questions with her eyes. For the first time, he felt that his past was not something he had to hide or forget. It was something that could exist beside his present. As trust grew, so did expectation. He noticed the way others watched them together, not with suspicion but with interest. There were looks exchanged, quiet conversations stopped when they passed. The rancher sensed that something was being prepared even if no one spoke of it openly. One night, the woman invited him to sit near the fire with elders. This had never happened before. He felt nervous, unsure of his place. He kept his posture respectful, his eyes lowered, his movements careful. The elders spoke for a long time. Their voices were calm, thoughtful. The woman answered them clearly without hesitation. Though he did not understand the words, he understood the weight of the moment. This was not casual talk. This was about the future. Afterward, she walked with him in silence. When they stopped, she faced him fully. Her expression was serious but not harsh. She placed her hand on her chest, then gently pointed toward him. She spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. He felt his breath catch as understanding began to form. She was offering him a place, not as a worker, not as a guest, but as something deeper. A bond that would tie them together in a way that could not be easily undone. His mind raced. Fear returned, sharp and sudden. This was more than he had prepared for. He thought of freedom, of choice, of the life he had lost. But he also thought of the nights by the fire, the shared work, the respect that had grown between them. He saw her not as someone who had taken his life, but as someone who was offering him a future within her world. He did not answer right away. She did not rush him. That alone spoke volumes. She understood that this decision carried weight for him, just as it did for her. That night, sleep did not come easily. He stared at the stars, the same stars that watched over his old ranch. He realized that the land had always demanded sacrifice. This land was no different. The question was not whether he would lose something, but what he would gain in return. Over the next days, he noticed more changes. People treated him with greater warmth. He was included in meals, in planning, in shared laughter. The woman stayed close but never pressed him. Her patience gave him space to think, to feel, to choose. One afternoon, they worked together repairing a shelter damaged by wind. Their movements were in sync, smooth and natural. At one point, their hands touched briefly. Neither pulled away. The moment passed quietly, but it left something behind, a sense of rightness that surprised them both. He began to see the bond not as a trap, but as a path. A difficult one, yes, but honest. She had not hidden her intentions. She had not treated him with cruelty. She had allowed him time, dignity, and choice within the limits of their world. When he finally spoke, his words were simple. He told her he was afraid. He told her he missed his old life. He told her he did not know who he would become. She listened without interruption. When he finished, she spoke gently, her voice steady. She told him fear was part of every beginning. She told him no one remained unchanged. She told him that walking together did not mean forgetting who he was. Her honesty settled something inside him. As the days turned toward another season, the decision no longer felt distant. It hovered between them, quiet but present. Both of them carried it carefully, knowing that once spoken fully, there would be no turning back. One evening, as the fire burned low and the camp rested, the woman sat beside him. The air was still. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. The words were few, but their meaning was clear. She spoke of unity, of shared life, of walking forward together. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight and the warmth of the moment. When he opened them, he met her gaze and nodded once. In that simple gesture, his path shifted forever, not through force, not through fear, but through understanding, respect, and the quiet acceptance of a life transformed. The morning after his quiet decision felt different, though nothing around him had changed. The sun rose the same way it always did, soft light spreading across the land. People moved through the camp as usual, preparing food, checking animals, talking in low voices. Yet inside the rancher, something had shifted. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. The woman did not announce anything. She did not stand before the camp or speak grand words. Instead, change arrived through small signs. She walked beside him openly now. When food was shared, they sat together. When decisions were discussed, he was allowed to stay nearby. No one questioned it. The camp accepted what had been chosen because it had been chosen with care. The rancher felt nervous but not afraid. He understood that respect here was earned through actions, not promises. So he worked harder. He listened more. He learned the customs, the stories, the rhythms of the people. Each day, he felt less like someone passing through and more like someone rooted, even if those roots were still shallow. There were moments when the past returned sharply. Sometimes a smell in the air reminded him of his ranch. Sometimes a sound carried him back to early mornings alone with his thoughts. In those moments, his chest tightened. He wondered what had become of his land, his animals, the life he once believed was fixed and unchanging. When those moments came, the woman noticed. She never asked him to forget. She sat with him in silence or placed a steady hand on his arm, grounding him in the present. Her understanding did not erase his pain, but it softened it. Slowly, he realized that memory and belonging could exist together. As the seasons shifted, preparations began quietly. There was no rush, no pressure. Everything was done with intention. The rancher was shown new responsibilities, ones that would belong to him long term. He learned how to care for the land in this place, how to read signs in the sky and soil that were different from what he knew before. Learning gave him purpose. The people watched him closely, not with suspicion but with interest. They saw his effort, his patience, his respect. Children greeted him openly now. Elders nodded when he passed. Trust had grown, slowly and honestly. One evening, a gathering was held. It was not loud or dramatic. A fire burned in the center and people gathered around it. Stories were shared. Food was passed from hand to hand. The rancher sat beside the woman, aware of every breath he took. This was a moment of acknowledgement, a quiet recognition of a bond formed not by force, but by shared endurance. He did not understand all the words spoken, but he understood the feeling. This was acceptance. Later that night, when the camp had grown still, the woman spoke to him softly. Her words were simple but filled with meaning. She told him that walking together did not mean ownership. It meant responsibility. It meant care, honesty, and effort, even when times were hard. He answered in the same way, using the words he knew. He told her he would try. He told her he would learn. He told her he could not promise perfection, but he could promise truth. She listened, then nodded once. That was enough. Life settled into a new normal. They shared work and rest. They faced small disagreements and solved them through patience. They learned each other's habits, strengths, and quiet fears. The rancher discovered that love in this place was not loud or dramatic. It was built through shared days, steady hands, and respect. There were challenges. There were moments of misunderstanding and frustration. Language failed them sometimes. Customs clashed, but instead of turning away, they faced these moments together. Each problem solved made their bond stronger. One day, as they stood on a hill overlooking the land, the rancher realized something important. He no longer felt trapped. He felt chosen, and more importantly, choosing. The future was uncertain, but it was his to walk into with open eyes. He understood now that life did not always follow the paths we expect. Sometimes it breaks apart what we know to build something new in its place. That did not mean the old life had no value. It meant it had led him here. As time passed, his story became part of the camp's story. Not as a captive, not as an outsider, but as a man who crossed worlds and learned to live between them. He carried his past with him, but he no longer let it define his limits. On quiet nights, he and the woman sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. There was comfort in that silence, a shared understanding that words were not always needed. They had both lost things. They had both gained something unexpected. The rancher no longer measured his life by what he had lost, but by what he was building. A life shaped by resilience, humility, and connection. And in that wide, unforgiving land, two paths that once ran separately now moved forward together. Not perfectly, not easily, but honestly. And sometimes that was the truest kind of freedom.